You are watching an online intensive of the dance of the eye and the hand, painting the waters of Lake Superior, Lesson 3, the Horizon Glow.
Welcome back. Today we're going to do the third of four versions of the waters on Lake Superior. And today we're going to do the horizon that just has a little bit of a glow right on the edge of it. And this version also has a little more clouds in it, and generally has a little more cast of the carmine that we'll use as a undercolor. So let's see how we start this one. So we start again with a double sheet of Schwen paper, making sure that it's the smooth side up. I have 3 mixing bowls for some color, and I'm going to make up 3 pots of color. And what's surprising with this whole series is it's really just basically 3 colors: the indigo, the carmine, and a little bit of ink mixed with water. And so I'll start with my indigo. I've working from pigment that's been squeezed from some tubes of Marie's watercolor. I'm going to pick up some of the indigo here and mix it in. Best probably not to do that over your paper. And dry my brush. I'm going to then pick up some of the carmine and then just a little bit of ink to make a gray. And then at this point I've dried my brush. I just am going to take a little bit of it. I want to see how much tone I have of each. So we'll start what I would consider fairly quiet colors, and then we'll work up from there. I'm using just a regular landscape brush. I could also use what would be a white-haired brush. Either one will work at this point. And again, I would encourage you to spend as much time looking at the model, if not more, than the actual painting. I see our horizon line is about where it has been on the first 2 paintings. And the movement is, again, fairly horizontal, although in this case, it feels like there's some open areas, some either column areas, more solid. So I'm going to start with my carmine. I'm actually just going to pick up a little bit of the indigo to take some of the shine off the carmine. I'm going to dry it and then just using more of the side of the brush, just putting some areas of carmine as an undercolor. Really almost just scraping the paper, not doing too much or too broad. Better at this point to do less. And there's just a little bit of it in what will be the sky. And really using almost the butt of the brush just to get some very soft and sort of raspy or broken line to set the undercurrent here. Then I'll move on to some of my indigo. I'm going to splay the tip a bit, pick up some indigo. And a number of you have reported about how wet your paper has gotten. When I load, I also am patting it fairly dry. I'm trying not to put too much on at once. And here I'm using a broad tip and just again repeating some of this movement across. Get a little bit more liquid in that. Now, what's important pretty early on is to get a sense of where am I going to be leaving that open white space. I'm just sort of vaguely setting that out so that I don't inadvertently close that up too soon. I'll continue with and again in the sky I'm also being a little bit careful not to do too much too soon, not to close off my options before I need to. But just sort of beginning to set out some of the areas where those clouds are. Take a little bit more of the indigo. Again, just writing right under where I think that glow is going to be. And we're in no hurry. We're just adding lines as we go, trying to get some rhythm, some movement, and some openness in this one. There's less tight rhythm on this piece than on the others. And I think I'm going to shift right away now to my hockey brush. Get it very wet to begin with, but then I'm drying it quite a lot on my tissue. In fact, I'll get even some fresh tissue. So again, part of the challenge is really starting with a little pigment and a little water. So I've really have dried this off. It's damp, but it's not, it's not dripping water. Messing up its head a bit, and I'll take some of the gray. Let's test this, be sure we're not too dark. And again, drying it again, and I'm going to continue here. I'm using it almost at a diagonal to get some of this color in, or in this case, the gray in. Again, I'm working above and below where I think that glow is going to be, trying not to lose it. And I think this is enough for a first layer. It'd be best if we let this dry, and probably about 3/4 dry before we continue. So let's take a break and let this dry. So let's continue here. This is just like 90% dry, not totally, but pretty darn close. And I'm going to take just a little bit of my gray and mix it in with some of the indigo, just to gray out the indigo a bit. And then I'm going to start again with my hockey brush. And this I just have let sit the whole time, so it's damp but not wet. So a lot of this is about moisture control. So I'm going to continue with this pattern of bringing horizontals across letting it dry, and then just very carefully here where I'm in the area where the glow is going to be. Just leave that open for now. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of the carmine, and again, drying this off. I just want to get, if you will, like pixels of that color, not a whole lot of it. And just a little bit up in the clouds. Now again, we'll let this dry for, I'd say, about 20 minutes. So now this is really 90% dry, just barely damp. I'm going to continue with my hotkey brush. I'm going to put a little more water into my indigo. I want to bring it up a couple of shades. And then again, dipping it in. And this time I did not put the hotkey brush in water. It's just been sitting here on the table the time that this has been drying. So it's moist, but it's not, you know, it's somewhere between moist and damp. I'm going to continue with these movements across the page. And since I went lighter, I'm going to be putting a little more on to start blending these layers. And as I get close to where I'm going to have that glow, I'm being a little more cautious, and I'm leaving probably twice the area that I think I will need for that glow, because in time I know I'm going to lose some of it. Again, going above the glow. And here staying fairly delicate because I want to leave enough room for those clouds. And just a little more water to this, dry it, and taking out just a little more of that white, but leaving enough so that I have area to use as clouds. Okay, now this is quite wet, so we'll need to let this dry for, I'd say easily maybe 30 minutes. Now this is a little bit damper than the time before, maybe 70% damp. I'm going to refreshen my indigo. Almost used all of it up last time. I'll put a little more water in and then some more of the pigment. And let's dry that and test it. So it's pretty light, and that's exactly what I want. I'm going to continue to use this landscape brush with the indigo, and I am going over in some places just to thicken up the areas and to help blend. If there are areas where there's gaps or abrupt stops, I will go over some of those just to start blending and creating more of a smooth surface. Going over some of the areas where there is still some white, just to blend what's under that. So in time, I'll put on enough layers here to make this appear like one surface, one piece. And then as I get close to the area that is going to be my glow, I want to just be a little more careful. I'm still keeping a pretty broad part of that open. I don't want to get too close. Close it a little bit here. But as you can see, there's hardly any pigment on this. It's really just a very, very pale. But just barely touching the sheet as I'm doing these areas that would be basically a break in the cloud cover. Just sort of scraping along. A little bit of the butt of the brush to get some additional texture in. Well, let's see, this is be 80% dry. It's just a little bit damp to the touch. I'm going to again refresh my indigo. Put a little more pigment in. I'm making this just a little bit more color than I've had before. And go back to the Hake brush. I'm going to start again at the bottom and just adding a thin layer of the indigo. Not covering everywhere, but I'm covering it a lot, particularly paying attention to places where either the carmine is a bit abrupt or where there's a lot of white still showing. I can see here that my paper is just peeling a little bit. A little bit of it is rolling up as I do this. I probably could have waited a little longer and done a little more, let it dry just a bit more. And again, a little more careful up near the top. I want to start blocking in some of this sky from the side, but I'm really barely using any tone here. It's almost all water, which is why the paper is peeling a bit. And I need to be careful around where I'm going to do the glow, because since I'm working so wet, it'll start to spread and I'm really at risk of losing my whiteness. I think I'm going to add just a little more water and a little more pigment. I want to bring the pigment a little darker. And I think I'll stay with this, my landscape brush just to add, paying attention to areas where I can see abrupt changes. I want to use this as a way to blend and make more of what's going on an undercoat, so I don't see as much on the surface. It becomes smoother. And I'll probably do this 2 or 3 times before I'm done, just to mask the layers, to really get to where it starts reading as one solid. And I have to be very careful. It's a very light touch at this point because the paper is really quite vulnerable. It's really quite wet. I don't think I could pick it up and move it at this point. But I'm being a little more aggressive, if you will, with adding some more tone and doing this while what's under it is still a little bit wet, so that these layers really do begin to blend. I'm going to put a little bit more up here. And again, I'm not getting too close to the edge of where my glow is, because I don't want to lose that with the bleed from the wash. Okay, I think that is enough. Paper is a little bit balling up here, but we'll just let that dry totally this time, so that it can take the additional layers that we still need to add. So let's let it dry. How far back is dried back, and we're making some progress. I want to do just a couple more layers to blend this, and then we'll focus in on the glow. So I think what I'll start with, I have my Ake brush, which is just a little bit damp, and I'm going to go over again with just a little bit of gray, my ink and water wash, dry it off a bit, splay my tips, and again just running horizontally. And I'm being fairly liberal now in terms of really putting more of a broad stroke than a scraping stroke, leaving a little bit of flying white there. But the goal of this is primarily to begin to get a unity in the color. So after putting lots of small layers here, and I'm being very careful near that glow, I don't want to get too close. But I will just run it right along to enhance it a bit. And then I will do the same on the upper side, just riding fairly close. So I'm really getting a bit daring here. I put a little water in this so I can smooth out any line that might be there. And again, I'm gonna put more water in and go higher with this. So this is mostly water, but I'm trying to get a gradient so it's not too abrupt. And there, now we'll let this dry again, probably a good 15-20 minutes, and then see where we're at. This is about 3/4 dry, It's damp, but not really wet. I'm going to go back to my landscape brush. Let's see what I got on here. And do some of the detail for this glow. And I'm going to pick up some indigo. Not a lot, but I want it fairly dry so that I can come across this area and put in a more defining line. Let's pick up a little bit more here. So that there is just a bit of an edge. A little bit more. And this is a bit terrifying, but you're trying to take out just a little bit of white and also to add just a bit of an edge. And I'll do some of that over on this edge. And it sort of gets narrower as you go off the left side. And again here it starts a little bit closed and then opens as it gets towards the center and then closes again as it gets towards the end, to the left. And then I'll leave that for now, because we don't want to get too much water here because it'll bleed and it'll take away your glimmer, your glow. I'm going to add another layer to the general water, but I'm going to do this with just with a landscape brush. Again, looking for areas where there may still be too much white or too much of the carmine coming through. So what I'm really doing is just sort of a broad blending of it all. Some of it I can do fairly dry and sort of scraping. The closer I get to the glow, I want to be careful so I don't have any spillage. But this is not a lot of liquid, and I'm spreading it so that there's no edges to it. But it's a very, very thin layer of the indigo. Just not a whole lot of pigment in it. And I'll probably do this maybe 2 or 3 times more just to do the blending. And if I do it in very small or thin layers, then I'm not going to do anything too abrupt. I can leave just a little bit of dryness there to give a little bit of shimmer to the water. And I'm going to go above and do the same. Again, I'm staying, say a good inch away from the glow so that if it bleeds, I will not bleed too much into that. Here I'm getting quite daring. Just watching that bleed. And I can bring it down. I'm sort of just fading it out on the edges. There's not much there. And I may on another layer come back and do a little bit more. Here I'm just going over it with almost a dry brush just to do some more blending. So I just have that little bit of pure white left in the center. Let's do this a little bit. And we'll get a little more weight up here, just to get a little more of that color in there. But with the dryness, I can bring it across some of these clouds and just get a really nice broken line, just to give a little bit of definition, but not solidity to it. It's just some dry, broken line to further define the clouds. Now, we'll let this dry again, and then we might be pretty darn close to doing final corrections. So now this is probably 95% dry. It's not bone dry, but it's pretty much solid. I'm going to focus again on just refining this edge to the glow, and using a little bit of the indigo with a little bit of black. I just want this pretty dry, because I want to be able to almost make a line. There we go. So just ever so gently along here. Above and below. And reinforcing it above and below, and thickening it above and below. So now it's pretty much a dry line, just to get some of this texture in. Just adding a little more of the wash, pretty much straight up indigo, to make the foreground just a little more thick, and do the same up above as well. And again, some of this is pretty dry. I'm just kind of scraping it across just to get some texture. And with that done, I think I just want to do one more layer over the body of the painting. And I'm going to do it this time just with some of the carmine. So just another layer with the carmine. I'm putting a fair amount of water in it. Again, the job that we're doing here is to blend the layers. Pull it off the edges. And then just a little bit above the horizon. Just adding a little solidity to help make that glow pop. A little bit more down here. Just really watching that bleed, not wanting it to get too close, but wanting there to be a sense of opening in the middle. So I'm taking off some of the white at both ends. And now we can.
So here is our final piece, fully dried. Just a little bit of paper showing through in the glow in the center on the horizon and the clouds. The rest is covered with layers of washes. Next time, we'll paint waters of Lake Superior with a shimmer that goes from horizon to the shore. Until then. Before you go, please note there's a PDF on the website for each lesson containing the models for each lesson and supplementary material for each lesson. You have been watching Distance Learning from Laughing Waters Studio.